University of Michigan football team, 9-0 on the year. You know, one of the top teams in the nation. Clearly, he's got the top defense in the nation. They will be without their coach, Jim Harbaugh, who was suspended for the rest of the regular season. Essentially, today's game at Penn State, and then you've got a game coming up against Maryland, and then they close out the season on the, at home at The Ohio State University. We know what a big-time game that is, what a big-time rivalry that is, and supposedly it's supposed to be without Jim Harbaugh, who was suspended by the Big Ten courtesy of this investigation that's been going on, where a former staff member who resigned last week, by the way, by the name of Connor Stallion, who was infiltrating sidelines and stealing signs to ultimately give to Michigan. Excuse me, I apologize for the interruption, that's my fault. That's what happened. And essentially what happened is this. Because you had a guy like Connor Stallion that was infiltrating sidelines and stealing signs and giving it to Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff, it broke Big Ten rules and the NCAA as well. And because of that, somebody's head had to roll. Somebody had to pay the price. And they're using Jim Harbaugh to send that message. Let me be very clear. I think that's bullshit. It's flat out BS. I'm not saying Jim Harbaugh didn't deserve to be suspended. What I'm saying is that ain't enough. That ain't enough. Now, I understand that the rule might be stupid to some people because you can pick up a coach and call, and you can get intel about an opposing team. You can do all of those things. So what's wrong with having somebody spying on other teams to figure out what the hell they're doing, to feed the information and the intel back to the coach? As far as they're concerned, that's scouting, that's evaluating. That's what they look at it as. I don't care about any of that. You know what I care about? I care about the fact that historically, if this involved kids, they'd have been suspended. They'd have paid the price. And so the way I look at it is, this is not enough. It's not enough for Jim Harbaugh. You ain't affecting him. You ain't taking any money out of his pocket. Oh, a matter of fact, remember, according to the reports, he's still allowed to coach the team and be around the team and engage in team activities, just not on game day. So I can coach you, and I can school you, and I can tutor you, and I can counsel you from Monday through Friday. Saturday, I'm not on the sideline just for 3 weeks, by the way, because I'll be allowed to come back for the postseason, okay? Because that's where Michigan is expected to be. I don't think the punishment is enough. But before I get into any of that, I was asked that very question last night on CNN with Abby Phillips. And I got to tell you something right now. Usually, I will speak extemporaneously off the cuff, and I've got no problem with it. But in this particular situation, I must say that I articulated and elocuted myself with quite brilliance, if I might add. I mean, I just need to point that out. So because of that, why should I just speak right now when I can show you what I said Friday night on CNN? Take a look.
I do want to ask you about the Big Ten Conference sanctions today, the news today, against the University of Michigan's football coach and head coach Jim Harbaugh over the sign stealing investigation. He'll be suspended now for the last 3 games of the season. Right. So do you think that this sends enough of a message?
No, absolutely not. I think that Michigan football, and I've stated this for the record, as long as there's an open investigation, devoid of a conclusion by the NCAA and the Big Ten Conference, Michigan should not be allowed to participate in the college football playoffs. I said it last week while I was on campus giving a speech at the University of Michigan, just a few yards away from the big house where they play football. And I'm saying it now on national television. If you have a situation where you have somebody who was a now former employee that was literally infiltrating another team's sidelines, stealing signs to give your team an advantage, that's cheating. That's actually acquiring an unfair advantage, which is what the Big Ten acknowledged in a punishment that they handed down to Jim Harbaugh. You see, that needed to be said. And the reason why it needed to be said, because I'm going to reiterate the point that I made. You can't go to the college football playoffs if the investigation is still open. If the NCAA and the Big Ten have not drawn a definitive conclusion as to what happened, you cannot have Michigan in the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of people out there saying, Stephen A., man, this is cruel, bro. These are kids we're talking about. These are kids, their blood, sweat, and tears. They put it out there. They were 12-2 2 years ago. They were 13-1 last year. They went to the college football playoffs both times. And now they're en route to doing so again. Stephen A., this is getting in the way. This is a bit extreme. It's a bit extreme. What about the kids? What about the kids? Well, Stevie A. love the kids. I sure do. But that's kids everywhere. Not just at Michigan. What about the kids at Alabama? What about the kids at Oregon? What about the kids at Washington? What about the kids at Florida State? What about the kids at Texas? Last time I checked, all of them are in line to get a spot, one of those 4 spots for the college football playoffs. They weren't associated with sign stealing. They weren't deemed to be a team or a program that had a competitive advantage. We're talking about the integrity of the sport. Why are we minimizing this? Why are we minimizing this? As I said last night on CNN, and I'll say it again, I was on campus at the University of Michigan. I was a few yards away from the big house where they play these damn football games. Ask my man Juvie. Ask my sister Sumatra. I said it right there on campus, and I'll say it again. They should not be allowed to participate in the college football playoffs unless the investigation is closed. Now, if you close it and say there's not enough evidence to show that there was an unfair advantage, if you close by saying we can't find out how culpable, if Jim Harbaugh was culpable at all, we certainly can't find out how culpable he is. You want to say all of that, and because of that, the investigation is concluded, fine. But if there is a specter of cheating that's hovering over you, you're talking about a program going to the college football playoffs, likely with the likes of Georgia, the reigning 2-time defending national champion. I think Florida State's going to be there. You know, you look at some of these programs and some of the folks expected to be there. Nobody's going to be talking about them. They're going to be talking about a Michigan squad that doesn't belong there in some people's eyes because they're perceived as being cheaters. Now, it might not be the kids' fault. They didn't sit up there and have somebody on staff padding his wallets, using him and utilizing him to steal signs and ultimately feed the program that stuff back. I get that. I truly do. But here's the flip side. You telling me the kids didn't benefit? So if I know what play you're going to run, and I know who's going to get the football, and I know where you're going to get it, I know how you're lined up, I know what you're doing schematically, I can't be fooled because ahead of time, I've got the intel on you, and I received it by breaking rules that were implemented by the conference, if not the NCAA. You have now gotten an unfair advantage. And even though we don't want to take any credit away from those kids, those outstanding kids that step out onto the field and perform week in and week out en route to a 9-0 record, the reality is clear. You had an unfair advantage over your opponent because you were able to do things they weren't able to do. Now, Michigan's going to make the argument they weren't the only ones who did it. There were other programs that are doing it. And we also understand that, you know what, Ohio State or other programs within the Big Ten, it doesn't hurt them to highlight Michigan's flaws. It helps them. We get that. We understand it fully. I totally get it. But in the end, if you got caught with your hands in a cookie jar, you got caught with your hands in a cookie jar. Nobody's saying to suspend the season and that they can't play. What we're saying is you might go to a bowl game. You can continue playing your games against Maryland, against Penn State, against Ohio State, and you can have a bowl game. But your berth in that college football playoffs with a national championship on the line is not acceptable for a team who's perceived, or a program who's perceived to have cheated its way there. And as unpopular as we want to make it, because those brothers, white, black, and beyond, went out on that football field and they performed, and nobody's trying to take anything away from them. But in the end, as much as we don't want to say it, as much as we don't want to bring it up, in the end, you do not want to be out there with the college football playoffs going on, with a national championship on the line, and the entire situation is tainted by a team who some are accusing of cheating. Jim Harbaugh being suspended was not enough. As far as I'm concerned, they should have said, we're going to continue this investigation. We're going to move forward. We're not going to slow walk it. And we're going to draw a conclusion. And everybody needs to be fully cooperative, because any hesitancy, any reluctance, any stalling whatsoever, Michigan is not going to be allowed into the college football playoffs. We're going to draw a conclusion over the next 3 weeks as to whether or not you go into the playoffs before that college football selection committee picks those final 4 teams. That is all I'm saying. I'm not attaching guilt or innocence, even though the Big Ten Commissioner, Petiti, did. I'm not attaching guilt to Jim Harbaugh. Something went wrong. Rules were broken. As stupid as the rule may be, it was broken. Kids have been suffering in college sports for years for far less transgressions than what we're talking about. We're talking about the integrity of competition. I don't see what the complication is. I truly, truly don't.